Hello, Mr. Nolan.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Debatable. Uh-oh. Something happened. Nolan. Oh my gosh, something happened. Hello, noble ones. I forgot the intro. Hello, noble ones. Welcome back to my channel. This is the Meta. You know all of that. So, this is the Metatron speaking. So, something happened, ladies and gentlemen. Christopher Nolan. Narrative decisions, film critics, and whether he Christianized the Odyssey. Oh my gosh. This is from Billy, by the way. Oh wait, this is my shit. He's being, I suppose, interviewed by the People's Republic of China. And hold on a minute. I mean, bro, you gotta give me this one. Or give me the next 5 seconds. Come on. But let me do the intro. I effed it up in English. Let me do it in Mandarin very quickly. 大家好，欢迎来到我的频道，我是美塔特龙。今天我们一起要看一个视频，就是。I never get to use Mandarin on this channel. On my second channel, however, I go absolutely nuts. 这是我的家是吧？等一下，我调一下设置。这是我的公寓的客厅，这是我的电视，桌子上有一杯咖啡，这是我的衣柜，那是我的床，我可以上去。这是我的厨房，这是我的厕所。我的厕所很小。This lady interviewing this Muppet. First and foremost, I'm being disrespectful to the lady. Chinese subtitles, what have we got? 你好，诺兰先生. Oh, hello. That's how they say Nolan in Mandarin. Nolan. You know, it's not bad, but it doesn't really... Nolan, you're going for fourth tone and second tone. I think 2 first tones is much better, particularly for the way I say Nolan. I'm losing my mind already. Okay, so what have we got? So Zhong Shu, I guess that's her name. 采访, that's interviews Nolan. Nolan, okay. 你是西方文明黄金时代的吟游诗人吗? Oh, come on. Oh, come on. Are you the bard of the golden age of Western civilization? No, itinerant poet, in fact. No, he's not. But you know what? Instead of the translating bard for him as 吟游诗人, how about you go for 吟游诗猪? That's my suggestions right there. If you know Mandarin, you know.
Hello, Mr. Nolan.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Debatable.
Well, filmmakers are bards of the modern age, just like the Greeks know of Odysseus, Achilles, Agamemnon because of Homer's narratives. We know of the Batman, the Joker, and Oppenheimer because of your narratives.
Well, I mean, I'm going to be so pedantic on this one. Here's my first, actually. I'm sorry, but no, I know Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, and all the rest because of comics. What have they banned comics in China after Facebook and YouTube? And Western comics, no? All right, then. Oppenheimer, I'll give it to him, okay, because, I mean, it's history, but watching a movie, I guess. How do they say Homer in Mandarin? 河马. Wow. 河马西本身.
And Homer tells stories of distant past. You too. The Trojan War happened between 12th to 11th century BC, but Homer...
Thank you for BC, I appreciate that. Oh, did she say BCE?
...lived in the 8th century BC, so that's a long...
No, she said BC, based woman, 谢谢你.
...long time ago. But Homer's time was a time of rise. It was a time of civilizational rise. Yeah. The Greeks were prospering as a culture. The economy, the books, the thinking, everything is on the rise for a couple of hundred years, really until the 5th century BC. So Homer's tone was celebratory. It was victorious. He celebrates the victory of the war. And
man, she's starting strong. So Homer's was glorious and victorious. You, however, sir. Oh yeah, I like that, man. She's really okay.
Your tone is emphatically not. So I guess my first question is,
the heck are you laughing at?
Does that say something about our age? Are you a bard for a civilization at dusk?
I think that's a really interesting point, a really interesting question. I mean, underlying the main part of the point is this 400-year or so gap between the events that Homer is describing and when Homer's story was written down or first received by readers and audiences. That's a pretty interesting gap. And for me, I don't think I'm completely at odds with the way Homer's telling the story when you look at it from a sort of historical perspective.
You absolutely are. Are you joking? No, very historical, brother. Yeah, it's so historical.
And the reason is, and what I got interested in, as I adapted it, is that Homer's writing about an era before his. He's writing about an era hundreds of years before that his audience viewed as being more advanced than theirs.
Right.
So they were a civilization on the rise, but they were trying to get back to where they'd been 400 years before. So that idea of a cycle, that idea of, as you say, a civilization at dusk, I think it's there in the poem. It's subtle, but when you look at the history as well, and you look at the idea that, when they...
Yeah, I wish you looked at the history for once in your freaking life.
Would unearth these walls of old palaces that were crumbled. They called them Cyclopean walls because they thought only a giant could have built such grand walls. They had this idea of the greatness of this past civilization. And so I became interested by that collapse, that what they call the catastrophe, the Bronze Age collapse, what happens between the events of the Trojan War and Homer. And so, I think it's something that from a modern perspective it's frightening and interesting and intriguing. And I think for me, it partly comes out of having worked on Oppenheimer before this, which is very much a film about the end of the world, about the end or collapse of civilization ultimately. So I think, I definitely carried that.
I can see a connection there, okay? Because of course I'm going to give him a hard time. Man, they would never put me in a room with him and do an interview because I would go absolutely nuts on the guy. But whatever, I have to give him credit. This connection, I can see it. I can see the connection. But he still hasn't addressed her question. So fully. So look forward to that.
That sensibility into this adaptation of the Odyssey.
So you changed it. Great.
I mean, one thing that captured me was that the concept of atonement doesn't exist in Greek culture. It doesn't exist in the Greek language. It doesn't exist in Homer's Odyssey. It exists in your Odyssey.
Man, you can write a list of 50, 100, 200 things that don't exist in Homer's Odyssey, but exist in Muppet's Odyssey over here. I'm going to rewind it later to see how they say atonement in Chinese, though. I know it in Japanese. I don't know it in Chinese.
So I guess a natural question that I had when watching the film was, did you Christianize the Odyssey? Do you think that atonement, why did atonement become important for the coming of catastrophe?
I think it's a really good question. I wasn't too conscious in how I was approaching it philosophically, other than I really honed in on the idea of what's termed xenia.
Okay, this is going to drive me insane. For the love of everything that is holy on Mount Olympus, xenia, xenia, it's an X. It's in the freaking letter, brother. Now say it however you want.
In the film, we call it Zeus's law for simplicity, but it's that idea of mutual respect, that I treat you the way I want to be treated. And in their theology, it's because you might be a god in disguise. So I really drilled down on that, and I started to realize that for me, a lot of what's interesting about the interaction of history and mythology is this idea of the sea peoples, is the idea of the people from the sea who were thought to have precipitated the Bronze Age collapse. It's one of the great mysteries of history, of like, who were they? But the idea that really a violation of xenia, a violation of Zeus's law, which is what the suitors are doing in the palace, that really, it's that break of Zeus's law that is causing this difficulty and this damage. I think the idea of atonement, in a way, is what we bring as viewers to the story. I don't know whether there really is atonement in the film, or whether we just feel that that's the catharsis, or that's the process we're seeing in the final meeting that we've waited for between Odysseus and Penelope.
That is a good point, in the sense that oftentimes people will bring their own perspective, biases, and lived experience into a movie, film, even art, video games. A lot of the times this does happen. So I'll give him that. That's fine. To say, well, it's not that I intentionally put the atonement in there. It's possibly that it's just us as viewers. So he's putting himself among the viewers, I suppose, are projecting it. That's fine. But I do find it revealing that he said he didn't consciously think about the philosophy that he was talking about, but she asked about Christianity specifically. So when he says philosophy, he means Christianity. I think that's true. Because one of the things that I have argued a lot in the last few weeks, particularly when I had to deal with that fringe of conservatives that think that the movie has a conservative message. The movie does not have a conservative message intentionally, but it may have a few things that you can find overlapping with either traditionalist thinking, Christian thinking, and somehow conservatism, only because it's there, either because you're projecting most of the times, or unintentionally. It's not what they mean. It's not what he means. This guy is not a conservative. Ben Shapiro, shut the fuck up, you don't know what you're talking about. But what's interesting about the Christian aspect is that he just said it. He didn't do it intentionally. But as Western people, whether you are a Christian or not is irrelevant. When you are brought up within Christian culture, then some Christian thought will be within you because of your culture. And that's probably what got projected unintentionally into the movie. Also because it's not like they looked at what the Greeks actually thought or believed or how they approached things. They didn't. They didn't care about that.
But I think in a way, we may be bringing our more modern sensibility to that. But I think it's a very interesting question. And insofar as it's there, it's not a deliberate attempt to, for example, Christianize it. But
I told you. I've been saying this to all of the people that said, no, Nolan is a neocon. They said, secretly he's a conservative and he's trying to support the current administration in America. I'm like, you gotta be out of your mind. I told you, whatever you can find, it's like, this actually sounds like more like a Christian thing than an ancient Greek thing. It's unintentional. It happened because he doesn't know anything about how the Greeks thought, and it just so happened to unintentionally ended up, and he just said it. He just said it, guys.
It's an outgrowth, or it's a natural conclusion of burrowing in on this philosophical idea of what happens when you break Zeus's law.
I guess from what you were saying, the connection between atonement, which is the perspective of a Christian world, and xenia, which is the perspective inherent in the Greek world. What connects them is the fact of war. What is the response to war? And you still want to say that the presentation is inherent in the Greek mythological worldview, that war happened when hospitality or xenia is broken.
She actually pronounced it right.
I think so. And I think that sometimes it's difficult to draw a line. And I think academics often maybe are too dogmatic in drawing a line between different philosophies and as they evolve historically. Because
what the heck do academics do now about these things? Or you instead?
I think I was more interested in the commonalities, because one of the things I found is that once you ignore the theological underpinning of xenia, what you realize is that it is what we in modern terms call the golden rule. This idea of treat others as you would be treated has never really changed over time. The reasons that we try to hold people to that might have changed, but the idea itself hasn't changed. And what I came to think is that what the poem to me is saying, or inspiring me, is the idea of civilization depends on this rule and possibly is even defined by it. And that, to me, was a really interesting thing to realize, that this ancient text, to me, speaks directly to the modern world, because I think we live in a world where the concept of xenia, the concept of mutual respect, is more challenged, I think, than it's ever been, in more obvious ways than it's ever been. And I think we see the negative effects of that in terms of what defines civilization, what binds us together.
Right. Here's another Greek concept that is challenged in our world, hubris. There's another. You've already started to complain about academics, and I feel like the next question will...
Well, complaining about academics is fine in as far as they are pushing messages that are outside their area of expertise, and it's only politics, so it's a travesty, and their PhDs should be stripped from them because they betrayed public trust. That is the one time where you should absolutely be horrendously against academics. Because they're fake academics at that point. They lost it. They lost it. I've been fighting them for years. Similarly, but when an academic speaks about something they have dedicated their entire life, I think it's important. It's not that they can't be challenged or they can never be wrong, but it is also important that perhaps you have to do a lot of research in order to do that, because otherwise you might be just misunderstanding things because of, Dunning-Kruger effect. You think you know more than you do, or perhaps you're missing the basics. So like I often challenge academics within like the world of classicism, and I do it together with a team, ancient history, medieval period and all that kind of stuff, Japanese feudal period, because we have sources, we have studies, we do things like that. And oftentimes said academics are not even doing what they're supposed to do. They're just changing everything, and they think people won't notice, or perhaps they go outside their area of expertise and start telling you things about linguistics, which they don't know anything about. But I wouldn't dare to try and, for instance, challenge a mathematician on discrete mathematics or whatever the heck it is, because I don't know anything. I would have to first study, research, put time into it. I don't believe for a second this guy put any time into ancient Greek history and mythology.
Expose me even more. There's another great book written by another great man, Thucydides' Peloponnesian War, also has a central theme on the hubris of the Athenians.
Yeah.
He blamed the fall of the greatest civilization in the world, Athenian democracy, on the hubris of the Athenians.
Yeah.
Your film centralizes on the hubris of one man, the human pride of one specific man. My question is, should Odysseus repent for his human pride? Maybe pride appropriate for a great man?
Man, right? She's sharp with those questions. Wow.
I mean, I suppose the question could be asked, what difference would it make if he repented? That's the interesting thing about these philosophical approaches, is that his repentance would be purely internal. It would purely be for his own spiritual self. It wouldn't necessarily affect anything outside him because the damage is done. Xenia is broken, maybe for all time. I mean, that's the interesting thing. I think, that is the thing about hubris. That is the thing about, it's tragic because it's irreversible, essentially. And that's where Christian theology looks at it in a different way, but
absolutely,
in a practical sense, doesn't necessarily change what's happened, and therefore, in storytelling terms, isn't necessarily relevant. That's when I say we bring our understanding to it. So we feel that there's catharsis because there's confession, because there's honesty and intimacy between Odysseus and Penelope, and that was very important to me, and I'm very invested in that emotionally. But if it has no practical effect, and the collapse is coming anyway, the catastrophe is coming, what difference does it make if he repents?
It's interesting because I am willing to, even though I hate what he has done with the Odyssey, I am willing to listen to him when he talks about storytelling, because that is something he knows about. I enjoyed Inception. I enjoyed Interstellar. So storytelling is something that this man understands. And so that's something I'm willing to listen to. When he talks about the historical, I am not one I listen to anything, particularly after those costumes.
Now that's the interesting thing. Are we concerned with his spiritual well-being, or are we concerned with the world that he lives in, and the world that in some sense he feels he's damaged?
We live in an age that demands apology from greatness.
True. I'm going to say it. I have no filters, guys. I have zero filters. Oh, but I'm afraid because then they're going to call me name. They want you to apologize for being white.
Yeah.
Great storytellers, when they portray greatness, Homer celebrates it. We circle around it. We dance around it. We turn greatness into privileges, and we demand apologies for it.
Oh my God, this lady's on fire.
That's a fact of Hollywood. Dance around it. We turn greatness into privileges, and we demand apologies for it. That's a fact of Hollywood. And I'm just wondering if, as one of the greatest storytellers of our age, how do you approach greatness? Is it still a story of apology and that demands repentance and reflection and self-criticism?
Well, I think that when you're talking about storytelling, you're always in conversation with the expectations of the audience. So it really is an energy that's brought from the audience as well as an energy that's put forward from the story itself.
Yeah, and I wonder which part of that energy was ended up giving us Helen of Congo.
So when you're characterizing somebody, and the trite version of this, or the criticisms often leveled at movies in general is, the character has to be made sympathetic, so the character is manipulated in different ways or changed in different ways. And that's a fundamental flaw of film criticism in a way, or storytelling criticism, because to be able to identify the mechanism does not invalidate the mechanism. And that's a real problem in criticism today, because people have this idea that because I can understand why the story affects me the way it is, therefore it didn't work. That's not how storytelling works.
Well, explain whatever, but apart from the fact that is like probably the smallest of the criticisms that you have received, so I don't know why you're choosing to fixate on that one, but maybe that's the one that got him the most. Fine. But here's the thing, though. Explaining to your audience that provides criticism why their criticism is invalid, it's not great. It's not a great look, particularly because professional criticism, so basically you're complaining about amateurs, right? You're just a bunch of amateurs. Well, you see, after you guys paid off all of the freaking professional critics, they're all bootlickers now. 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10. Who are we supposed to listen to? That is, if he's complaining about the amateurs.
So when we create a heroic figure in a story, as storytellers, we have to be mindful of the energy that the audience brings to that story and the interaction between our intention and the way the audience receives that. And the fact that that mechanism is identifiable to people doesn't invalidate it. And part of that mechanism is saying, are we going to treat greatness as an absolute, or coming from a democratic, coming from a more idealized philosophical state that we live in today's world, where we want to view people as equal.
They were democratic too back in the day anyways.
Do we have to apologize for that greatness? And the answer is yes, we do.
No, we don't.
Or the audience rejects the greatness. And that is part of the mechanism. Once again, the fact that the mechanism is identifiable doesn't mean that it's invalid or shouldn't be used. And so for me, as we talk about it, this is none of these things are things that I try to be conscious of when I'm writing or self-conscious of. But as we talk about it, what of course we realize is that my attempt to do that is to retain it within the philosophical surrounding of the breaking of Xenia that I have found interesting in the story. So I'm trying to be true to the thematics of the story.
You're trying to be true to the thematics of the story. She just told you why. The story is being... If you were to be true... Apologize for greatness, guys, and if I Christianize it, I didn't mean it. That's what we got so far.
Create a character that the audience can invest in and can feel satisfied by.
As you were speaking, first of all, I like how you dragged film critics down the water as well as academics.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, you're laughing. She's cooking you, brother. She's cooking you. Yes, he did. These academics don't understand anything. And the audience, what the heck do they know?
But I just realized filmmakers, in a way, have it much harder than poets, because poems can only be read in a language that is the culture in which it is written. You know, you can't read Shakespeare really, and not in English, or Goethe, not in German. But filmmakers have to speak to audiences outside of his polis, people who don't speak their language, and you come to a place with people of different nomos and different customs, and you don't put them into consideration.
No, but the interesting thing about film, and this is, when I was talking about film criticism, I was talking more about amateur film criticism.
Bro, I called it. I freaking called it. I told you. Oh, no. Guys, when I was complaining about the critics, I only meant the amateurs, because the pros, they're all vetted. Don't worry about it. It's the amateurs that are the problem, because we can't buy them. There's no freaking way to buy them. Damn it.
Than professional film criticism, because professional film criticism tends to understand the necessity for the mechanisms.
Yeah, professionals, they yeah, absolutely.
You're looking at a lingua franca of storytelling created by Hollywood for the last 100 years that is very effectively universal. And so it is its own language. And that language is understood by people all over the world, which is what's incredible about it. And it is a very, very accessible modern language of storytelling. And it has certain rules, it has conventions. You can break those conventions, you can bend them, you can move them, but you have to be aware of them the whole time. And as I say, I'm thinking more of amateur criticism when I say that people who, because they feel they've identified the mechanism, they feel that it invalidates it. That can be true of certain elements, and film grammar, film language evolves with that. So when a trope becomes too familiar to an audience, then it has to be changed. But we do, as filmmakers, avail ourselves of that common language. We build on that understanding. Our audience has seen many films, and they understand that language. And so you're playing with that language. It's the language of genre. It's the language of audience sympathy. It's the language of clarity and of narrative direction and how you guide people through a story.
You're talking about a relationship to tradition and innovation. Because at some point the mechanism becomes trite or unusable.
Yeah.
But without the mechanism, you can't really build. You have nothing to
exactly.
Yeah.
You can't. Yes, you can't completely have a tabula rasa. You can't throw everything away. You have to make your choices in terms of how am I orienting a story. So, for example,
I do appreciate you pronounce tabula rasa somewhat correctly, so that's nice in Italian.
One of my first films, Memento, was a story that I structured in reverse chronologically. But what I retained was a very, very clear and simple 3-act structure. So the structure of the film, as it's received by the audience, is very, very conventional. But the chronology is unconventional. And so those are the choices you make. That's one example where you say, okay, I need this to be extremely familiar underneath so that I can change what's on the surface.
See, he is very competent. No one is saying he's not. He has brought to us incredible stories and films that I do enjoy rewatching. I'm not going to rewatch The Odyssey, though, because 1, it was kind of boring, except for the last hour. 2, because of all the political messaging in it that actually annoyed me. And the Hollywood nonsense casting. So that's a shame, because I do believe that if this man ditched his own ego when he comes against academics that actually know what they're doing and looked at how to represent the period correctly in a way that would have been incredible. It would have been amazing to see the palaces, the architecture, the armor. The weapons were fine, actually. They got the swords, okay, and the bronze axes, but they were actually pretty good. I'm going to be honest about that. But the armor, everything else, the clothing was nonsense. The ship, why using a Viking ship? So had he ditched his own ego when it comes to that and talked to people who actually know, and then had he ditched the politics that forced him to bend the knee and do the nonsensical casting of race swapping and all that stuff, the transgender Greek warrior, had he ditched both things, the politics and the ego, we could have had a colossal movie in his hands. But here we are.
And that's a continual mechanism that's evolving and that you're working with the whole time.
I'm again thinking like a nerdy doctoral student who has to write a dissertation. I mean, writing on Plato or Aristotle is the most difficult thing to do. Just like making a film on the Odyssey, it's been done, for thousands of years. And making Memento, you can make it whatever you want. Nobody knows if the character. They won't have a complaint about your adaptive choices. And I'm curious, you've said before, after Oppenheimer, with the success of Oppenheimer, you felt like you've had a kind of liberty to do whatever you want or actualize what you want to do. And you chose the most difficult.
You can never do whatever you want when you work with Hollywood. There are absolutely, I check budgeting, you cannot do whatever you want. I mean, you can, as long as what you want aligns with what the cult wants.
Dissertation to write, if you're getting a PhD.
I mean, in some ways, but in other ways, there's something I do think your question is slightly missing, which is that what I'm trying to say is that when you make Memento, yes, it's a character I've created, and people won't criticize it on that, but it's in a tradition of noirish, amnesia-based noir fiction, and people judge it by those terms. So even though on the surface of things, nominally, a film is a different or an original creation, the audience and critics, they tend to judge it in relation to previous examples of the genre, which is an advantage and a disadvantage. Sure. And so, yes, when you adapt Batman, for example, there are a lot of people who are going to say, well, hang on, why is it this way? Why is it that way? And everything else. Yeah. But even with an original story, it's the same thing. It's like, well, hang on, why have you used the protagonist in this way? Why has this character done this? Why has it
exactly? Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah,
done that, and they're judging it relative to the overall cultural flow of the movement of cinema and the conventions of cinema. And as I say, it's not a complaint. It's because it's just something you have to be aware of as a filmmaker. It's an advantage and it's a disadvantage.
Yeah, no, it's not a complaint. The one who was doing complaints was Lupita Nyong'o complaining about Homer not casting enough women. That's a complaint. This one is not. Although he did say that he didn't like the ending of the original text because it was misogynistic. So, I mean, plenty of complaints. Luckily, not this one, though. I did like the expression of how an original character can still be problematic and people might still have trouble with the way it's received. But then again, I think it's unquestionable that when you work, never mind Batman, when you work on a story that has thousands of years and also is foundational to the West, then that's on a completely different level. Is this a fair comment?
Yeah, with the Odyssey, you've dragged the classicists to as hounds behind your back.
Yeah.
I guess final question for me: what are the gods?
Ooh,
are they
okay.
figments of imagination, or are they necessary, noble lives?
You know, that's interesting because I want to see if he's going to answer it. Because this sounds a bit like the question that they asked him about Inception and the little, I don't remember the word. I don't remember the word in English, but the thing that you spin, and the main character was spinning, and people were asking. So at the end, when you see that he's still spinning, so is it a dream? Is it not a dream? That kind of situation that he left it as a cliffhanger, and he did not reveal it. He said, "That's not a question for me; it's a question for the audience." I actually liked that. Let's see if he's going to tell us, though.
They are, to the characters in the story, they are reality. And what I found interesting about looking at the idea of gods and how to address it, the way I got interested in addressing this from the point of view of people who would have lived in that time, for whom in a pre-scientific era, evidence of divinity is everywhere. And so the existence of gods is not an article of faith, it's simple reality. So thunder and lightning is God speaking to them. The state of the ocean is moved by the gods. They have no other explanation for it. And so just as we accept things from science as absolute fact, the
Let me see.
Earth is round and we travel around the sun. We can't know these things. We take them as faith because they're presented as facts. The same would be true of the theological structure that explains nature to people of that time. And so for me, the gods are real, but they are inside the people. They are being projected by the people.
Oh, that's cool.
There is a lot to say, actually, when it comes to what he said here. And there are a few things that it's not that I take issue necessarily, if that's the way he wants to see it, whatever. But I do want to say a few things. So let's see.
And what I found interesting about looking at the idea of gods and how to address it, the way I got interested in addressing this from the point of view of people who would have lived in that time,
Right.
For whom in a pre-scientific era, evidence of divinity is everywhere.
Evidence of divinity was everywhere. But even today, by the way, from a Christian perspective, evidence of the divinity is still everywhere. That doesn't change whether or not there is. And you might dislike that, by the way. Of course, I'm saying this as a Christian, but you could be atheist and say, oh, it's just because you guys don't. Right, but I'm being honest. Right, it's a reality that even though you might not like, but Christians today see evidence of the divine in everything. So that hasn't changed. That's only my point. I'm not trying to argue against or pro-science. I'm one of those people that thinks that science and faith can absolutely go hand in hand, even though they are two separate and distinct things with different objectives. But they can go hand in hand. I can have faith and I don't need to reject science because of it. And you can be a man of science and still have faith in your own personal life. You just don't teach faith in your science class and don't teach science at church is really what I would say. But that's one thing that I wanted to say. Let's continue.
And so the existence of gods is not an article of faith. It's simple reality. So thunder and lightning is God speaking to them.
Even this, though, it's not the right. This is the way someone represents classical antiquity and their perception of the divine as opposed to forces of nature. That's how you imagine them to think based on watching movies rather than reading what the sources say. Because believe it or not, if you actually look at how the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans talked about natural phenomena, you read it, like when there was the explosion of the volcano at Pompeii, you would imagine with this mindset, you would imagine, oh yeah, surely they said, oh, the gods are here to punish us. What have we done? The gods are raining fire from the sky. But when then you read the Romans, and they actually start to try and analyze everything pragmatically. I'm not saying that maybe as they look at it, they might be like, is Mars angry at us? Yeah, that can be a way to interpret it as well. But a lot of the times, the Romans go down to trying to explain, for instance, why after a volcanic eruption, the earth or the soil becomes fertile. And they don't say it's because the gods blessed it. No, they say it's probably the fact that it's created around the elements of the soil that they try to, and oftentimes they're wrong, other times they're right. They also guess things right, which is why, for instance, they were able to devise a form of cement that could self-heal in water. Take a second to think about that. Or this is how also the Romans understood very well steel, just like they could produce steel. Not as well as medieval people, but they could absolutely produce steel. Steel is not a modern invention. And it's not a thing of, oh, it's just they see lightning and they just think gods. They do, but they don't as well. They have a little bit of both. And when you read the sources, a lot of the time, they're very pragmatic in the way they try to explain physical phenomena of the outside world. They don't immediately go to, oh yeah, it's the gods. It's not a gods of the gap. That's what I'm saying.
The state of the ocean is moved by the gods. They have no other explanation for it. And so just as we accept things from science as absolute fact,
But science is, even this, I'm gonna be pedantic, but this is not something I say. This is something scientists say. Science, for instance, is not about proof. Science is about evidence, two different things. And what we have when we look at theories, which are, the highest, so I'm not talking about laws are the highest. The degree you've got laws, the highest thing we've got, and then you've got theories, and then you've got hypotheses, etc. But even when we look at these, oftentimes they are models to which we, through science, explain physical reality because through testing. So it's testing, it's not faith. It's different. You don't accept, because scientists told us. Right, but why do they tell us? They tell us because they test it and it can be replicated. There is evidence that points, and in fact, science changes. If science worked like faith, you would have a dogma and you would never change it. Even if you present things that are like, but wait, now we understand differently. No, I don't care, I'm not going to change it. That's how dogma works. But science doesn't work like that.
The earth is round and we travel around the sun. We can't know these things. We take them as faith because they're presented as facts.
Oh, no. Oh, my gosh. Science is a faith now? No. I mean, sorry, but no.
The same would be true of the theological structure that explains nature to people of that time.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where they can use beautiful words, and so it sounds like he's smart, but in reality, I'm not questioning his intelligence, but I am questioning his ignorance when it comes to both the ancient world, modern faith, ancient faith, and the basic concepts of science. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this, that it wasn't too annoying. I did enjoy it. Thank you for watching. 谢谢。再见。我要洗澡，然后我们可以吹头发啊！我忘了，我们迟到了，我们需要去上班，离开公寓。我卡了吗？啊，不好，打工的时间就要过了，得快点坐上车才行。我的家的外面是大片住宅楼组成，公司大楼的感觉之类的，看起来星巴克。我能离开这个地方吗？你好，你是我的经理吗？啊，我迟到了，真的对不起，谢谢您的理解，明白了吗？请问，先生，你是猪？请问，你好，再见，你是猪？为什么锁了门？有客人，我很喜欢这个音乐。先生，别发呆了，你好，你要喝点什么？等一下，先生，谢谢光临。No， 我开玩笑啊，先生，你在吓我。Nolan.